Hey, Chief.
Hey, Zach.
How's your Monday going?
You know what? It's going fast. This whole daylight savings time thing, I don't know. It came early and it's moving quickly.
Oh, I'm with you on that. I know. It's like, slow down, day, slow down. Yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, hey, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. And thank you, by the way, for doing the tribute to Sergeant Harnett that you did in the city. It was absolutely beautiful. You're very talented.
Thank you very much, Chief. Yeah, it was an honor to do that. Yeah.
I thought it was great. I don't know how I spotted it. Maybe you tagged Calgary Police Service or
I
something.
did. Yes. Yeah.
I remember spotting it there and thinking, wow, I wonder who did this. I'd like to say thanks. And then you reached out.
And here we are today.
Here we are today.
So, first things first is I wanted to get started and maybe ask you is, how did you get started in all of this? Becoming a chief, becoming a part of the service.
So are you talking policing generally, Zach?
Police in general, yeah.
Well, actually policing generally was quite by accident. I think there are many people who grow up and they would tell you that they kind of always knew they wanted to be a police officer from a very young age. That wasn't me, actually. I grew up in a small town in Alberta with 500 people. And I didn't, you know what, honestly, through high school and stuff, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I remember driving around the day after my graduation party, and everybody seemed to have it so together, in the yearbook and stuff, everybody knew what they wanted to do, and I just wasn't certain. And I remember having a bit of a crisis of identity there, thinking, well, why does everybody else got this figured out and I don't? But you know what? I started leaning towards becoming a fish and wildlife officer was what I wanted to do. And through a coworker, a boss of mine that was a mentor, she hooked me up with her brother who lived in Lethbridge. And I was able to move in with these folks because they'd rented a house going to college in Lethbridge. And there was three fellas that were there already, and they were in the law enforcement program. And I was in the environmental science program. But by the by, I ended up sort of mixing with their friends, the social group and whatever. And I started to develop an interest in law enforcement. And the two weren't so different really in many ways. And so ultimately I ended up after college volunteering for the RCMP. And at some point I just thought, man, if I could actually do this job that I'm volunteering at as my real job and then volunteer at this other job that I have now that I liked as well, I'd switch it in a second. And so ultimately I did switch.
Interesting. Wow. And then did you start at the Calgary Police Service or were you hopping around Canada?
No. So you know what? I started in 1992. Okay. And as I said, the funny story here is I grew up in a town of 500 people. Yeah. So very small rural town, not even so much as a stoplight in town. Yeah. And I was volunteering for the RCMP. And so I'd applied to the RCMP, but I wasn't having success. And so I got a very good piece of advice from the detachment commander at the time who told me, like, we think you'd be a great, fit for the RCMP and we encourage you to keep trying. But in the meantime, if you want to do this job and serve the community, then don't get hung up on the color of the shirt. Just get in and you can move around after. So with the closest center was Edmonton. And I was taking some courses actually in Grant MacEwan College in Edmonton at the time. Oh, yes, yeah. And I saw a post for the Vancouver Police Department. They were doing a recruiting tour, I guess, out then. And anyway, I went through that process and I got hired by the Vancouver Police. So I actually started my career in 1992 in the city of Vancouver.
Now, how did you work your way up to become chief of our city?
Oh boy.
That's a journey.
I'm not sure if I could put my finger on what exactly the turning points were along the way, because, to be honest with you, I really sort of wanted to be a sergeant. Like when I started out, I thought, boy, it'd be great to be a sergeant. I'd like to supervise, and I liked the idea of working with the frontline police officers, and that's kind of was my aspiration. But I think what happens over time is, if you're committed to the community and if you work well with people and you maintain a good reputation, ultimately people come to you and say, hey, you do this job quite well. Would you consider doing this job? And ultimately, I think it's mentors and coaches and people that come to you along the way and say, you know what, like you're doing a really good job where you are. And I see you as being somebody who could perform in this other role. And so really, I think it's been other people, other mentors and other leaders who have prompted me to step into different roles over the years. And ultimately, how I became chief is kind of a bizarre, long story.
Yeah. Now that you are chief, has it been an experience and what you thought it was going to be like?
You know what? So I was fortunate to, after I left Vancouver, I was in Edmonton for 24 years. So similar sized organization. And then I left Edmonton in 2017.
Right.
I became the chief in Camrose. So smaller city, but certainly a different environment in the sense that not as many people slept in the city overnight, but the city of Camrose was a hub for a large rural area, probably 250,000 people in the rural, basically agricultural field. And so that was a great opportunity to sort of cut my teeth and see what being the chief of police was like. And so what I found there was I was highly, highly accountable because if the people in the community didn't like something, they would obviously catch me at the grocery store. You're very accessible in that environment, right? And so people wouldn't hesitate to come and speak to you about the things that were on their mind. And the same was true of the employees. Same sort of thing. You're very accessible to them. And so if they want to ask a question about, why did you make this decision, or what about this, or how did this happen, they'll come and ask you. And I think the great thing for me there was it was a very strong connection to the people consuming the service of the police, so the community, and then also a very strong connection to the people who were delivering the service, so the members and the civilian employees. And so for me, it was very grounding, and it was, like I say, I felt very accountable and very connected to the work, and you could see and feel the difference. And so I got to cut my teeth there. And then when I came to Calgary, I thought some of those very same things, staying connected closely with the community and staying connected closely with the officers and our civilian employees, is very, very important. And then, of course, we ran into the pandemic and some of the issues that we've seen, which is some of that a little bit difficult. So if anything, I think that's been the biggest challenge of my tenure in Calgary has largely been the pandemic and how that has shut things down and sort of impeded some of those communications and connections.
I can't even imagine where to start or where you start through this pandemic. I mean, being a chief in today's time it's challenging, I'm sure. With everything that's happened, especially last year and all the ups and downs, how do you find a way to keep, civilians calm, keep your team calm, and still maintain some level of sanity?
Yeah. It's been really interesting because this was a very demanding job in the beginning. So when I started in June of 2020, prior to the pandemic, it was an extremely demanding job in that my own personal leadership style is to be visible and accessible and try to connect with the employees, to be out, to be seen, to go on shifts and thing with the employees, and also to attend functions in the community events, and to be seen and connected out there as well. So that can actually take up a lot of your evenings and a lot of the weekends. And so it was demanding in that sense. When the pandemic hit and a lot of those things shut down, the community events and stuff have largely become a thing of the past, except the ones that have now gone virtual. It was, I thought, okay, things are going to really slow down. And for a little while they did. But then to your point about how do you keep people calm and reassured, there began to be a higher need to use virtual platforms and still to get out to the employees. I mean, it looks much different now than it used to. And even to get out in small groups when we're able to do that for coffee, parking lot coffees and stuff like that, socially distanced with key partners and when there's issues. So it slowed down for a little bit, but then just the need to be able to communicate in various different ways and for having the employees to be able to hear from you became a much higher need. And so I found that it was demanding, and then there was a lull. And then when we realized this was going to last for a while, it became equally demanding, but in different ways.
Oftentimes people think police officers are not humans. We see them in uniform and say, oh, they're not human. Which they are. And how does some officer deal with the mental struggles, or is mental health a huge factor right now with what's going on in the service?
Well, you know what? Police officers are definitely human. I can tell you that they basically are representative of our community. the folks that we have in the police service here are very much, largely neighbors and coaches and parents, and they're just normal people in your community. And they're people who actually stepped forward to serve the community in this capacity. And so I think sometimes when we put on the uniform, sometimes people see us as a little less accessible and somehow that we're different. But I got to assure you that the folks are really at their core, they're just members of the community like all of us. But, during times like the pandemic here, it has been challenging because, when we heard initially the prevailing health advice about what was safe is for us to stay home, work from home if you can, limit your contact with people and that sort of thing. That's the way to keep yourself safe. Well, obviously, for a variety of frontline workers, including police, that wasn't an option for them. So you had to find a way to adapt the type of services that you provide to the community while trying to follow that public health guidance. So, there was a lot of great work done by our members to adapt the services to either do it by phone. You saw barriers installed in different places where people had to interact. There was, the use of personal protective equipment and the following of the guidance and that sort of thing to limit risk. But the reality of it is the nature of the business is such that if somebody's, struggling with mental health or you have to arrest them and they're not going to be cooperative, you're going to have to get within 2 meters and you're going to have to actually be able to interact with them. And the circumstances are going to be dynamic and, masks can get bumped aside and whatever. And also some of the people that we're dealing with aren't necessarily following the public health restrictions. When I think about some of the protests and stuff like that, people don't wear masks because they don't believe in it. In other cases, maybe people aren't hand washing and things. So the risks are there. And I think people's personal and professional lives have both been upended. And, think back to previous crises that we deal with. So if you think, in a Calgary context, the floods of 2013,
yeah.
We kind of know what to do when that happens. It doesn't impact our whole city. It impacts the area around the river and stuff like that. So there are places that are not impacted that you can work from. And it's better understood. The crisis is better understood, and we can understand how we can work through it. And it has a more defined beginning and an end. This pandemic has not had that. Everywhere is impacted. And there has been there may have been a defined beginning, but there certainly has not been a defined endpoint. And there's been so much changing as we went through it. So I think that's been a real challenge. And I think that has challenged people's mental health.
In the service, have you seen a lot more struggles and challenges come up in terms of mental health and mindset?
So we have some really strong programs in the Calgary Police Service for our employees to be able to have supports in terms of mental health and counseling and any of these types of things. Right in the beginning, when the pandemic first started, we saw a pretty big dip in people accessing those services. And I think we attribute that to some of our clinicians and service providers working from home and then transitioning to like an online platform for appointments. And so, initially, I think a lot of people thought, well, that's not going to be quite as engaging. I would sooner be sitting in the same room with you right now, having instead of having it over
Zoom.
And so I think people put off the appointments initially. So we saw initially a drop. And then again, after a period of time when people realized that, we were going to be in this for a while, then we saw people gravitate towards some of the online platforms and to, re-engage with services. And so now we've seen a bit of an increase. And I would say the increase has probably been in the last quarter or so as the pandemic has stretched on. And we definitely have seen an increase for sure.
Have you seen a rise in career opportunities with the service during the pandemic?
A bit surprising in that way. So we have had a larger than expected number of retirements and resignations since the pandemic started. Now, let me tell you why that is. In 2020, there was changes to the province's pension plan that the police officers participate in. And so there was an opportunity where as of April 1st, there was going to be a change. And so anybody who wanted to leave the plan at that point had to do it before April 1st. So we had actually 33 individuals leave the organization because of that change in the plan. And then in this year, in 2021, City Council is removing a benefit, a retiring allowance for all employees. And what that's doing is basically prompting people who have enough years to retire, if they're senior employees and they can retire, they're more likely to go in 2021 than they would have otherwise, because they want to take advantage of the last year of that benefit. So as a result of that, this year we've seen an increased number too. So as a result of that, that has actually surprisingly created quite a few opportunities in terms of promotions and lateral opportunities inside the police service. So yeah, I would say that even though you would think that wouldn't be the case, it kind of has. It hasn't really been COVID that's done it. It's been other things that have happened simultaneous to COVID.
Chief Constable, how do you separate work and your personal life?
Oh, interesting question. I find that's a hard thing to do. And so here's what I do to maintain, some semblance of separation if I can. Number one is I don't try to separate my days or my work week into 5 8-hour days or whatever it is, because I know that in this job I will have certain responsibilities after hours and on the weekend and that sort of thing. So what I really try to do is look at the week ahead of time and then figure out where my my time off might be, where I can connect with family or friends or that sort of thing. And sometimes it's not, Saturday evening or whatever that it is for many other people. Mm-hmm. And so I have to look more holistic at my schedule, recognizing that, the schedule can be demanding. The other thing that's very challenging about this job is, of course, the police service never stops. So in many jobs, you work from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m, Monday to Friday. And then at 5 o'clock at night, everything's quiet again until everybody comes back to work the next day. In the police service, it's not like that. We go 24/7, 365. So with the number of interactions that are going on between police officers in the city all the time, and the number of challenges and risks that we face just by nature of the work that we do, things happen, and I will get phone calls at any time of the day or night. So to your point there, it is very difficult to completely separate the two. I'm very fortunate that I have a supportive partner, because if I didn't have that, I think it would be really, really challenging. And the other thing is we have great people. And so when I'm going to go for a dinner for my anniversary or an occasion, I can hand off that responsibility to other members of the team, and I'm free to be able to do that. So I'm grateful for that too.
As a chief, are you able to ever travel? Like, if we didn't have the pandemic right now and you wanted to go away to Mexico for a week, are you allowed to do that?
Yeah, I am. So I'm sort of always in contact, never fully out of contact. But what I do actually, Zach, is if I'm going to travel internationally or away for a vacation, I will put somebody else up, one of the deputy chiefs up as the acting chief. And so realistically, it's not so much me personally, it's the position. Somebody's in the position. So if something comes up that the chief needs to know about, that person finds out, and then I will get notified of all the things that happened when I come back home.
Now, when I just can't imagine, do you sleep lightly, Chief?
Sometimes more lightly than others, I can tell you. I think for me, it just depends what's going on. I've been doing this for quite some time. So I think one of the most important things is as you grow as a leader and you mature over time, you realize that for the sake of the organization and frankly, for the sake of yourself, you can't be, particularly reactive to everything that happens, because a lot happens. So you can't take the organization on these wild swings based on politics or anything like that. You want to try and keep things as steady as possible for people while still taking seriously and dealing with issues that come up. So I like I say, I really try not to be this person. It might be a little bit, but I try not to make wild swings. And so if you can compartmentalize a little bit, I guess, then you can sleep a little bit better.
Yeah. When you're going through these phases where there's like, say, a crime and then no crime and crime again, issues, like you said, political issues, how do you stay calm? Is it meditation? Is it something that you do to kind of level yourself and ground yourself? What do you do exactly?
Well, for me, I like to make sure that my work is not the only thing that I do. Mm-hmm. It's very important to me to have some balance in my life with respect to time spent with family, time spent with our children. I like to read. Also for me, physical activity has always been very important. I find that I can sort of stay calmer and just more grounded when I'm exercising. And so sometimes things are really busy, and I'll know when I get away from my exercise routine. So even if it's, I love cycling, I love running and that sort of thing, but I will be able to feel it pretty soon if I'm off of my schedule. And so I really try quickly to get back on. But I find that making sure that I'm healthy, make sure that each day that, I'll be able to continue doing what I need to do, and I'll have the strength and stamina to do it. So I really try to stay connected to keeping balance in my life with all of those things. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, things just go much better than when I'm focused on work alone.
This past year, did you get some fear or anxiety ever? Just like everyone else?
Yeah, yes, for sure. I think the past year was a really interesting example of when you would get that, because as I say, having done this work for a long time, I've seen some of the challenges that come up in this job, and some of them are predictable. What wasn't predictable was something like a pandemic. What wasn't predictable was the murder of George Floyd and the worldwide protests. When people were actually protesting the police. Some of these were significant disruptive events that were occurring simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And so there really was in that process, there really was no manual that anybody had for how to manage this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's fair. Like, there's lots of times, my messaging to our people was basically just that, what, we've got a great team. We've got great people. We're not necessarily going to get this right because things are changing. We're going to have to keep moving. We're going to make decisions using the very best information we have right now. And if they don't turn out to be right, then we're just going to change them. And I think people connected to that message of hopefulness that at least, yes, that's right. We are strong. We will go forward. We understand what's happening. We're going to meet the challenges, and we're going to deal with this with integrity. But yeah, we're not going to get it right every time. And I think that took pressure off of other people too, who felt too like, boy, there's no manual. I don't know if I'm going to get this right. And we said, you're probably not. And that's okay.
And we were so used to always trying to go by the book and get everything right and whatnot. Now it's just free for all, Yeah.
Well, it has been. And I know that, I looked at some of the other people that you've had on the program, on the podcast, and think of how they've had to adapt their business and how uncertain the environment has been for them as well. And so I think that, it's not been without its challenges, but I'm actually really amazed at folks and the resilience of people and what they've been able to do to continue moving forward in these uncertain times.
If we had a third lockdown, I don't know how many businesses will survive now.
You know what? I don't know. I can tell you that we were out on the weekend, and of course it's beautiful and it's spring and that sort of thing. And you can see that people just want to be outside and want to resume some semblance of normalcy. And we totally understand that. I think as your police service, we feel it too. And as like I said before, like Calgarians, our officers feel it too. Everybody's, I think, in the same place. This has been a long haul.
Now, Chief, what are these on your badges right here? What are these, I guess, on the left side? Yeah.
Oh, the colored? These are actually what they call ribbons.
Ribbons, yeah.
So there's each one that's a different color is actually a medal or an honor that's been owed over time. And so, each one represents a different thing. For instance, this red one that you see, that's the Queen's Jubilee Medal.
Yes, yeah.
And then the one over here it's a long service medal. It's issued by the province.
Okay.
And what happens is you get it at 20 years, and then on your 25th year, you'll get you can see the bronze clasp there. So each one of these is actually a different medal. In policing and also community service, that's where these come from.
How does the community and its officers, I guess, work together, or I guess reduce the fear of knowing one another? Because we see that a lot.
Well, I think we have heard that a lot, especially since the summer. And so I can tell you that the Calgary Police Service has historically had a great community-based policing model, a model of delivering services that sort of focuses on community engagement and not just showing up after something bad has happened, but actually engaging with the community in positive ways, proactively to prevent crime from happening in the first place, but also to be connected to understand culture. So to attend community events and that sort of thing, and celebrations in all the various communities. And so the service has always been really, it's prided itself on that. But I think what we saw this summer was that, quietly over the last number of years, we've increased the diversity, of course, in the city of Calgary, such that we're actually the third most diverse city in Canada right now. And so it's clear that we were hearing feedback from some communities basically saying there were fears. People didn't feel like they were connected to the police, and there were fears of police. And so it was really important for us to be able to say, we had sort of sat back because for years and years and years, the Police Commission has done a community satisfaction survey or a citizen satisfaction survey. And historically, the police services has scored very high marks. So in fact, plus 90, 94, 95% supportive. So it's pretty easy to think, well, actually, no, we're doing a great job. Well, what we heard this summer is, we have some work yet to do. And there's been some changes in the environment. So like I say, it's been very important not to push away from the table or not be defensive about what we heard, but rather actually this has been a time to lean in to those communities and spend some time listening to those voices that we hadn't heard and understand where the gaps might be. And like I say, we have such a strong foundation of working with the community that I'm confident that we'll be able to make the connections we need to, and then continue to move forward. And like I say, it was a bit of a shock, I think, for everybody, but it was a good wake up call for us in case we were becoming complacent. And like I said, I'm fully confident that we'll be able to make those connections and move forward in a positive way.
Chief Constable, how does the officers and the civilians of Calgary connect with one another in regards to the things they do every day? Because we don't see the good often that officers do. We see, oh my God, an officer, I don't know, push someone down or whatnot. We don't see, hey, that officer actually came down the next day and brought us lunch.
Well, there's so much of that good going on, Zach. We maybe have to do a better job of telling those stories. And I think sometimes I was sitting the other day and I get daily the mail comes in, and I daily get a stack of compliments for officers. And I actually tweeted on social media about it the other day. Sometimes you just have to smile at the great work that's being done and be really, really proud of the work that's happening, but nobody gets to see that. And so that's why I thought, I'm putting this out on social media. In that case, it was an elderly couple who were in their home at night, and somebody broke into their home, believe it or not, in the middle of the night, extremely frightening. Anyway, they just talked about how scared they were, never been through anything like that before. The wife had locked herself in the bathroom. She told me she's 87 years old, locked herself in the bathroom and called 911. And her husband, who was 91, stayed out because he thought he would have to protect her. And I could hear the fear in their voices when I talked to them on the telephone and just said, listen, I'm really, really sorry this happened to you. But all they could talk about was how relieved they were when the police got there and arrested the suspect right in their home. And then a few days later, a number of members from the district came out with a bouquet of flowers and stuff to see them. And it takes a really, really scary situation. It doesn't take it away or make it better, but it certainly actually changes it a little bit. And they understood how much people cared. A very human thing to do. We need to do a better job of publicizing those things because, of course, those aren't the things that end up on the front page of the paper. It will be the situations where somebody pushed somebody down, as you say, or something negative happens. So I think sometimes we hear about the negative. I often tell people when I have an opportunity that the members of the Calgary Police Service have like literally hundreds of thousands of interactions with Calgarians every year. And out of those interactions, in a very, very small, not even like it's 0.0, like a fraction of 1%, is there any use of force used? And in even less cases than that, is there a complaint that comes from the community about force? So, I'm not suggesting for a second that we always get it right individually or collectively. We know that's not the case, but certainly our folks are out there having a positive impact. And if you talk to them and ask them why they do it, they say a couple things. One, they want to help people. And the second is they want to make a positive difference, and they do both.
Because oftentimes we'll see, like I said, the negative, or what we'll see is someone kneeling beside some kids at some charity event with a thumbs up, and that's it. I think these stories need to get out there. There's so many of them. Yeah.
There he is. You're right.
And the officers don't even want it out there, but they do it out of the goodness of their heart, their own money, hard-earned money, and they provide this for people. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that because you may remember the one story from, I think probably back around Christmas time or maybe a little bit before, where the officers from one district helped that gentleman who was down on his luck and bought him some groceries and that type. And it wasn't the officers that brought it forward. In fact, we would have never known about that except for a citizen saw and took a photo and sent it in. And so the officers actually didn't really want that posted out there. But there are so many. There was another fellow that was down on his luck as well that came from, it was another city. It escapes me which one, but he ended up in Calgary trying to get back home to see family in Ontario. And the officers used their own money and got him some ID so he could get a plane ticket and back on the plane and back out to see his family. And again, these are things that they do because of the motivation to serve and to make that positive difference. And they're not looking for accolades. And that is one of the challenges of getting the positive stories out there, is a lot of times they would just as soon not say anything.
Yeah. Isn't that a beautiful person, though, just in general? That they're not doing it for show. They're not doing it for anything. They're doing it for them, the goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, too. It's the epitome of, I think, a sort of pure motivation for it. Honestly, as I said before, policing doesn't get everything right, but I think at its very best, it is basically the epitome of the best we are, or the best of all of us, and the best we can be.
Goes back to that saying earlier, we are all human.
Exactly. 100%, Zach.
Yeah. Now, Chief Constable, when you look at the organization, is your role to look at it more from a business standpoint and say, how do we figure out where we're lacking, where we're losing?
Yes, I think the answer to that is yes, it is. But I think the magic happens when you look at it through a business lens, because, at its core, the police service is a corporation. It's a business like any other. I think that one of the things that we can never do, the leaders can never do, is forget that these are real people. So I'll often say, as a matter of fact, we had a brand new recruit class this morning. And so myself and the deputies started our day today down in the recruit class, welcoming new officers to training. And I said, you know what, I don't want to sound trite when I say that our people are our most important asset, because some, like many companies say that, many employers do. But the reality of it for us is we don't sell anything. We don't make products. We actually deliver important services to Calgarians, sometimes when they're at their absolute worst point in life or lowest point in life. And we get that done through the people that work for us. And so if we don't look after those people and make sure that they're at their best and they're supported, then how can we really expect them to give that service to Calgarians? So it really is true when I say our people are our most important asset, and we need to treat them like that.
Is there new tools or resources for officers joining the force, or that are on the force or service right now, that are dealing with issues of mental health and well-being?
I think I guess I wouldn't suggest that there is. Well, let me actually compartmentalize that question into two sort of areas. One is for their own wellness. I think the programs and the tools and stuff are really high quality, and they have been there. The key, and where I think we're making some progress, is there was a time back in years gone by where I think there was a real stigma attached to accessing those services. If you were a police officer, you sort of feel like you're somebody who helps people, and you're not somebody who should have your own problems and who should actually need help. So it's hard sometimes, I think, for police to I guess, acknowledge that they need the help that we all need from time to time. But I think, by the by, that's diminishing that stigma. And I think, things like talking about issues and Bell Let's Talk days, and just being open about the fact that we all struggle and we all need supports from time to time. We're all human. I think that's been really helpful. When you're talking about new programs and new innovation on the part of police officers responding to situations where people are experiencing crisis, there's some really cool things emerging, like virtual reality technology. I think for the young people that are watching the podcast, stuff like, the goggles where you actually interact. It's like an immersive experience where you actually deal with somebody who's having a mental health crisis, and you're able to continue to talk and the dialogue and the de-escalation. It's actually really, really cool. And it's something that's, because it's so real, I think it's extremely impactful training. So I think it actually has, it's stuff that people remember when they go through it.
Is there some new technologies coming out that, other than that you guys have been working on or looking at?
Yeah, that's probably the big one, or the most recent one, is the virtual reality stuff. And I think into the future, that's something that we're going to see more and more of.
Yeah, super cool. Now, what's one of your favorite books out there, Chief?
Oh, you know what? I'm a reader, so I like all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I've gone back a number of times. Well, I should say most recently, probably one of the favorite books I've read during the pandemic here is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Mm-hmm. There's another book that I read. It's called Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath. Chip and Dan Heath have written a number of books, but that's been my favorite. I like the Malcolm Gladwell stuff. You can tell I like a lot of, I'm not so much into the fiction stuff. A lot of it is sort of business books and that type of thing. Culture Code is another one that I've read recently as well, by a fellow by the name of, I believe it's Daniel Coyle.
Have you heard of The Shadow Effect?
The Shadow Effect, I think so. Keep talking.
Oh, it's so good. I love self-help books. So The Shadow Effect is about pretty much our shadow that we keep in a box and we don't open up sometimes. Those are the skeletons and the demons that we must face. Otherwise, it just follows us around like a shadow, and it draws on us. So that's something.
Who wrote that one?
Deepak Chopra's in it.
Oh, okay.
Marianne, I can't remember her last name, but there's 4 authors in that one book.
Oh, okay. I'll make a note of that after we're done speaking there and put that on my reading list. I try to actually read every year. I set a goal to read 12 books a year. I try to read one a month. I can tell you last year I didn't get there. I maybe had 6, but I'm back to 12.
Good. Are you seeing crime increase in terms of break-in enters? Yeah.
So, well, here's the thing. So those, like crime generally, had been on the increase. Mm-hmm. And that same can be said for all major cities in the country. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. When we look at the statistics in 2020, they will be anomalous, and they'll be anomalous for years. And I'll tell you why. So I think crime, there's a lot of criminological theory around the reasons why crime happens. And some of it has to do with our routine activities. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Routine activities theory is actually one of the criminological theories. And it basically goes that, when people are going about their daily lives, so for instance, ordinarily during the day, students would be in school, adults would be at work. And as a result of that, there's no guardianship around most of the homes. So when you see break-ins, you'll typically see them when the homes are empty. And so those will happen during the day. So something like COVID that changed our routine activities, closed down schools, got people teleworking, working from home. So you can imagine that actually break-in enters at residential premises went down quite substantially. The corresponding thing that happened, of course, while businesses were shut down, usually there's people in the businesses, so sometimes they're not as susceptible. But of course, we had areas of the city, especially in industrial areas, where we knew ahead of time that the vulnerabilities will go up here. So we ended up developing strategies to try to get in there to prevent break-in enters from those businesses while they're closed. But there's been a lot of things like that because people's routine activities and what they do has changed. It's actually changed what criminals do, and it's actually skewed the statistics for 2020.
Wow. Now, Chief, before we end our podcast here, I wanted to ask you, what makes a good spouse?
Makes a good spouse?
Or someone for you that's been a great partner in your life that makes you excel at what you do?
You know what? My spouse and I are so different, and we talk about that, and we celebrate our differences. And I think, sometimes our relationship might actually be easier if we saw the world the very same way, right? Because things would just kind of be more natural. But where she has such strong passions, and she's so active and that sort of thing. I have a hard time keeping up with her, actually. But also just a very, very supportive person who understands, I guess communication is a really important thing. I was going to say, part of the thing that helps us out is we communicate about things. Even taking on this role with the Calgary Police Service, before we did that, we decided that this would be something we would do together, understanding what some of the challenges would be. And so she actually made changes in her her professional life to sort of scale back, knowing that I would have to scale up, and so that she would be able to take on some extra responsibility at home around some of the things that keep our personal life moving and keeping connected with the kids and that sort of thing. And so just being able to communicate with one another, and there's times where I look for opportunities to be able to step in to help her because I know how much she helps me, and she makes that decision to do that. And like I say, we can complement one another. And again, we view the world and many things quite differently. And so her perspective on things always adds value to the way I might be perceiving it. And she says vice versa. She's probably actually being kind to me, but I think, we are quite different. And like I say, that it doesn't always make it easy, but I think at the end of the day, that does bring better outcomes when we stop to make sure that we consult one another and get those other perspectives. I think she's very much an extrovert. I'm very much an introvert. So when we go out, she will, in a social setting, she will often sort of take the lead on the social stuff because she feels much more comfortable than I do. So I think it's just very complimentary.
Do you think that introvert came from being from a small town and a little shy at times, or?
Perhaps it might be. When I look at my parents and their personalities and stuff, you wonder sort of how much of that was nature versus nurture. I don't know, but I do know that for me, I've had to be a forced extrovert for aspects of my job. But I can tell you that when I have to do lots of public speaking or be out in front and center and things, that type of thing exhausts me over time. I've got to rest after that. I recharge with quiet and reading and running. And
hopefully the podcast didn't exhaust you today.
No, actually the podcast has been great. Thanks for what you're doing, Zach. I think it's really great. I think the discussions, the diverse topics that you bring to light there, and the great people you've had on there, I think it's actually really great.
Yeah. Thank you for your time today, Chief Constable.
Thank you very much. And I wish you well, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere in real life soon.
Yes. Chat soon. Nice to see you again. Yeah.
All the best to you.